where nature sculpts magnificent masterpieces far beyond human imagination. And precarious pathways winding through breathtaking abysses. Let's take off and explore with Utopia Planet now. Long before it became a place of worship, this mountain was already a monument of time. For millions of years, natural forces shaped its ridges and valleys, laying the foundation for a landscape that would one day become one of China's most revered spiritual sanctuaries. Nanyue Hengshan in Hunan Province forms one of China's 5 sacred peaks, a great ridge of ancient stone shaped by more than 150 million years of tectonic uplift and relentless erosion. Its highest crests, reaching well above 4,000 feet and draped in mist that gives the summit a quality both geological and otherworldly. What deepens Hengshan further is the sacred architecture woven into its slopes, more than 200 temples and shrines scattered across the mountain, forming one of the most spiritually dense mountain landscapes in all of China. Even today, monks and pilgrims, hikers and wanderers climb the steep stairways and narrow trails together, each seeking something different in the same ancient stone. When winter arrives, snow and frost settle quietly over the temple rooftops and pine branches, and the entire mountain becomes a sanctuary of white stillness, silent, suspended, and unmistakably alive. How far would human ingenuity go to build where nature seems to say no at Mian Mountain? The answer hangs from sheer cliffs and impossible ledges, challenging assumptions about what could be achieved centuries ago. Mian Mountain rises more than 6,000 feet above Shaanxi Province, Its limestone cliffs, shaped by over 200 million years of geological formation, carved naturally into broad rock ledges and deep overhanging shelves that seem to forbid any structure from taking hold. And yet, the mountain's most extraordinary structures were built precisely in those impossible spaces. Cantilevered temple complexes hang from the cliff face, their foundations engineered through a technique of driving massive timber beams deep into crevices in the rock, then extending outward into open air to support platforms that float hundreds of feet above the valley floor. Some of these halls balance on pillars no thicker than a grown tree trunk, and how their creators aligned beams, galleries, and staircases with such precision on a near-vertical rock face without modern equipment remains one of architecture's most compelling open questions. Walking the mountain's winding stone paths and aerial walkways today, visitors pass murals, carvings, and ancient inscriptions preserved by the mountain's dry microclimate, each one a fragment of the layered world that forms here, where architecture and geology have become inseparable. Mian Mountain is where the limits of human faith and the limits of human engineering once met the same cliff face and somehow together refused to fall. From the air, it looks like another planet. On the ground, it feels like the beginning of the world. In Hunan province, Wulingyuan holds one of the most singular geological spectacles on Earth, more than 3,000 slender sandstone pillars rising from deep gorge floors, some of them climbing over 600 feet into the air, their forms so narrow and vertical that scientists classify this as one of the rarest landscape types ever documented. structure rising from the valleys below wraps the pillars in a nearly constant drift of mist, a living veil that shifts with the wind and transforms the landscape from one hour to the next, now dissolving everything into soft, grey abstraction, now parting to reveal lines of stone that seem suspended between earth and cloud. Narrow trails cut along the cliff edges carry visitors above the labyrinth, each step revealing a new geometry of rock and air below. Near the summit of one of the tallest formations, a small pavilion stands in perfect stillness. A human structure perched above an inhuman scale, its presence both fragile and curiously permanent. Yuan is where the natural world reaches its most extreme and most poetic expression, a place that does not merely impress, but quietly dissolves the boundary between what is real and what the imagination quietly insists cannot be. Some places feel less like destinations and more like something that has been returned to again and again across time. In the ancient ranges of Liaoning Province, Qianshan National Park unfolds as a landscape where tens of millions of years of weathering have worked granite into forms of quiet, sustained beauty, slender spires and smoothly curved domes shaped by wind and time into something that reads less like geology and more like sculpture. At the summit, a Buddhist monastery known as the Sky Temple clings to the mountain's highest point, built roughly 1,000 years ago using primitive pulley systems to haul timber beams up one by one to a peak where no road could reach. Visitors today ascend by way of more than 1,000 stone steps fixed to the cliff faces, each turn in the path, revealing a new angle on the mountain's ancient rock formations and the evidence of glacial erosion that left these extraordinary shapes behind. Where tectonic force and ice and the patient faith of generations have all worked on the same stone. Qianshan offers something rare, a moment where the deepest history of the earth and the quietest aspirations of the human spirit stand in the same place at the same time, looking out over the same view. Rising through mist and cloud, in southwest China, Mount Fanjing reaches an elevation of 8,430 feet and is revered as one of the country's 4 sacred Buddhist mountains, a landscape where geological drama and spiritual significance have been inseparable for centuries. Two temples rest at the summit on twin peaks, connected by a narrow stone bridge suspended above the void, a combination of the sacred and the surreal that few mountain environments on Earth can produce. Near the summit stands a massive mushroom-shaped rock formation estimated to have balanced through wind and rain for over 1 billion years. The mountain carries profound cultural meaning for the Tujia and Miao peoples of the region, whose traditions and rituals remain closely connected to the mountain's spiritual character across generations of continuous practice. The protected ecosystem of Fanjing is also the sole remaining habitat of the endangered gray snub-nosed monkey, recognizable by its bright blue face, with fewer than 800 individuals surviving in the wild. Thick fog frequently covers the peaks, and to protect the fragile environment, visitor numbers are strictly controlled throughout the year. In Zhejiang Province, Mount Jianglang is a UNESCO Global Geopark standing above the surrounding valleys in a formation of granite so vertically dramatic that the landscape appears to be making a deliberate argument about the nature of geological scale that the human eye takes some time to accept as real. Its most striking feature is Jianglang Peak, a granite pillar that rises with near vertical force from the forested terrain below, surrounded by dense growth and rugged cliff faces that frame the formation without diminishing it, and that give the impression of something placed there rather than grown from the earth. As visitors ascend the mountain trails, the scenery opens in layers: emerald valleys, jagged cliff edges, and ancient temples set quietly into the landscape, in positions that add centuries of human history to the geological drama already present in every direction. Standing at the base of Jianglang Peak and looking upward at the full height of the formation is the kind of experience that functions as its own form of perspective, a reminder that the deep passage of time is not a concept, but a physical fact inscribed in every face of the stone above you. Deep in Venezuela's wilderness, Angel Falls descends an uninterrupted 3,211 feet from the summit of Ayán Tepuy, a vast tabletop mountain rising above the rainforest, making it the tallest unbroken waterfall on Earth by a considerable distance. The indigenous Piman people have long called this waterfall Kerapakupai Meru. The isolated plateau of the Tapuy sustains ecosystems found nowhere else on the planet, with more than half its plant species existing in complete biological separation from the world below. By the time the water completes its descent, much of it has dispersed into mist, and only a small pool collects at the base. The falls gained international attention in 1933, when American pilot Jimmy Angel flew over the site, then crash-landed on the summit in 1937, his aircraft remaining there for decades before it was finally removed. Even today, reaching Angel Falls requires a small plane flight, a river journey by canoe, and hours of movement through dense jungle, a sequence that ensures the falls remain among the most genuinely remote wonders accessible to travelers. In China's Hunan province, the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Wulingyuan holds more than 3,000 sandstone pillars rising from deep ravines through dense subtropical forest, a landscape so visually extreme that it provided the conceptual reference for the floating mountains in the film Avatar, and that exceeds what the film managed to render from it. Wulingyuan is home to those pillars alongside deep ravines, hidden streams, and dense subtropical forest covering the valleys between, and its most famous area, Zhangjiajie National Forest Park, gained global attention after the film brought the formations to an audience that had not previously known this landscape existed. Sheer rock columns rise dramatically from the forest floor with jagged summits, frequently obscured by rolling cloud, and the constant interplay of fog light and elevation shifts the quality of the landscape throughout each day in ways that make any single description of it incomplete and any single photograph of it misleading. Beyond its visual drama, the region sustains a biodiversity that adds biological richness to what is already one of the most visually extraordinary geological formations on the planet, making it a place of scientific interest as well as aesthetic experience for those who look closely enough. Wulingyuan invites exploration and resists summary, a place that challenges the imagination not by exceeding what can be pictured, but by existing in a form that the imagination struggles to hold still, always shifting as the fog moves and the light changes, and the path turns toward another column rising from the valley below. Rising 656 feet above the jungle floor of Sri Lanka Sigiriya is the hardened core of an extinct volcano, a geological formation that existed long before any human being thought to build upon it, and that would outlast everything placed there by many millions of years. In the late 5th century AD, King Kashyapa seized power by overthrowing his father and built a royal palace at the summit as a defensive position of extraordinary natural height. The original entrance once passed between two enormous lion paws carved directly into the stone, giving the site its lasting name of Lion Rock, though today only those massive paws remain. Visitors must climb more than 1,200 steps to reach the top, where the ruins of gardens, pools, and palace foundations still look out over the forest canopy below in the arrangement their builders intended. Midway up the rock, vivid frescoes of royal women, painted directly onto the cliff face without modern tools, continue to survive the centuries. The nearby mirror wall still bears inscriptions left by travelers more than 1,500 years ago who paused here to record their admiration for what they saw. Spread across the island of Bohol in the Philippines, between 1,200 and 1,700, nearly symmetrical cone-shaped hills rise from the central plains, most standing between 30 and 50 meters tall, in a repetition of rounded forms that produces one of Southeast Asia's most immediately distinctive landscapes. During the dry season, from March to May, the grass covering the hills turns deep brown, the appearance that gave the formation its name and the seasonal transformation that draws the most visitors to see the landscape at its most characteristic. Geologists believe these hills were once ancient coral seabed, uplifted by tectonic forces approximately 10,000 years ago, with rainfall gradually eroding the softer limestone into the uniform domed shapes visible today, a formation that is not volcanic in origin despite persistent local myths to the contrary. Folklore offers a different account entirely, a heartbroken giant whose tears formed the hills, a story woven into regional culture alongside the geological explanation. The Chocolate Hills are a national symbol of the Philippines, featured on the rare 200 peso banknote, and viewing platforms in Carmen and Sagbayan offer panoramic views of a terrain found nowhere else on Earth. Known locally as Blue Lake, this small body of water in Russia carries a second and more evocative name, Geyser Lake, earned from the mysterious circular patterns that form continuously across its floor, beneath crystal-clear water of unusual stillness and depth. An underground spring pushes steadily upward through pale blue clay and fine sand, creating perfectly shaped, concentric rings on the lakebed formations that resemble frozen ripples, or the rings a stone makes in still water held permanently in a single frame, rather than expanding and fading. The patterns are never fixed. Subtle pulses from the spring shift the sediment every few days and continuously redraw the design, ensuring that no two visits to the lake reveal exactly the same formation below, making this one of the few places on Earth where nature produces and revises its own artwork on a regular schedule. The water temperature remains unusually stable year-round at between 40 and 45 degrees Celsius, and the lake's exact origin is still debated, some researchers suggesting that a powerful earthquake in 2003 played a role in its formation. Swimming is discouraged to preserve the integrity of the sediment rings, which the disturbance of any significant movement through the water would quickly destroy. In central Croatia, Plitvice Lakes National Park holds 16 terraced lakes connected by more than 90 waterfalls, a cascading system where natural barriers of calcium carbonate built up continuously by algae moss and bacteria act as living dams that slowly and permanently reshape the landscape from year to year. Water moving through the layered limestone is filtered to extraordinary clarity, with visibility in some areas reaching depths of over 45 meters, a transparency that allows the mineral content and microscopic life of the water to express themselves as constantly shifting tones of turquoise emerald and slate gray throughout each day. The system began forming approximately 12,000 years ago as melting ice from the last ice age dissolved limestone and allowed the first vegetation to establish itself across the newly exposed rock, in a process of slow, biological colonization that continues today. The park closed during regional conflict in 1991 and has since reopened under careful protection. Motorized vehicles are banned from core zones, and visitors move by electric boat, panoramic train, and wooden boardwalk in a management approach designed to preserve the quiet character that makes the landscape worth protecting. Carved into steep mountainsides more than 1,000 years ago, the Longji rice terraces, known as the Dragon's Backbone, cascade across the hills of Guangxi in formations of such agricultural intricacy and visual scale that the landscape functions as a form of art that also happens to produce food. From vibrant green during the growing season to shimmering gold at harvest, the terraces change with the rhythm of the agricultural year, each season painting the same slopes in entirely different tones and producing a landscape that is never static and never quite the same on any two visits made in different months. Longji is not only a visual spectacle, it is a record of sustained human relationship with difficult terrain, and the Zhuang and Yao communities who cultivated these slopes for more than a millennium continue to farm them today, maintaining both the physical terraces and the cultural knowledge required to sustain them across time. Traditional farming knowledge passed down through centuries continues to shape the terraces in the present, and walking the winding paths between the fields, visitors pass ancient villages where daily life still moves in the rhythms the landscape imposes on those who have chosen to remain within it. The terraces are not simply fields of rice. They are a civilization's answer to a mountain carved by resilience, sustained by knowledge, and still in continuous agricultural production across a span of time that most comparable human projects have not survived. Straddling the border between the United States and Canada, Niagara Falls is not a single waterfall, but three, the largest of which, Horseshoe Falls, carries the great majority of the combined flow over its curved edge in a continuous display of natural force. Every second, more than 3,600 tons of water thunder over the drop and plunge more than 160 feet into the gorge below, a sustained scale of water movement that has no obvious equivalent in the accessible North American landscape. The falls began forming approximately 12,000 years ago, when retreating glaciers carved a path for the Niagara River, and the erosive process has not stopped moving the falls roughly 1 foot upstream each year, and already shifting them about 7 miles from their original position. Hydroelectric plants on both sides of the border harness the river's power for more than 1 million homes, and studies suggest approximately 90% of fish carried over the falls survive the plunge. In winter, thick ice builds along the edges, while the central torrents continue their roar through the cold without pause. In Iceland's remote eastern highlands, the Studlagill Canyon is carved by the glacial Jökla River and lined with basalt columns rising between 65 and 100 feet from the canyon floor, geometric formations that closely resemble enormous stone organ pipes standing in tight and orderly arrangement. The canyon stretches roughly 1,600 feet. Its walls, composed of tightly stacked hexagonal columns, formed as thick lava cooled slowly and fractured into the symmetrical shapes, the largest concentration of basalt columns found anywhere in Iceland, assembled by geological process across time that exceeds any human frame of reference. For centuries, the canyon remained hidden beneath powerful river flows, its formations entirely submerged and invisible. In 2009, the construction of a nearby dam lowered the water level and revealed the columns, and the site gained wider public attention only in 2016, after local farmers shared its location with the outside world. Visitors can hike the east bank for close views of the formations, or observe from platforms on the west side where the full honeycomb geometry of the canyon walls opens in a single, uninterrupted panorama that rewards both approaches differently. Off the coast of West Papua Raja, Ampat is an archipelago of more than 1,500 small islands scattered across water of extraordinary clarity, a landscape that from the air appears almost painted with emerald islets distributed across glassy blue sea in formations of natural irregularity that no design could replicate. Ocean currents move through the reefs with consistent force and variety, nurturing one of the most biologically rich marine habitats on Earth, a place scientists have identified as the global epicenter of coral and reef fish diversity, where the concentration of species has no parallel in any comparable area. Large-scale tourism and resort development have not yet reshaped this region in the way they have reshaped comparable places elsewhere. The beauty of Raja Ampat remains raw and largely undisturbed, defined not by infrastructure, but by the decision to leave the natural environment as intact as possible for as long as that decision can be maintained. The dream of cutting the passage through the Isthmus of Corinth was first imagined in the 7th century BC, when rulers saw the possibility of connecting the Aegean and Ionian seas, but the engineering challenge and cost repeatedly stopped the project before it could begin. A stone ship track called the Diolkos was built, instead allowing vessels to be hauled across land on wooden rollers for centuries, and the modern canal was finally completed in 1893 after 11 years of excavation by French and Greek engineers who blasted through solid limestone to create it. At just 70 feet wide, the canal cannot accommodate large modern cargo ships, but smaller vessels use it to avoid a journey of 185 miles around the Peloponnese. The walls rise nearly 260 feet on both sides, producing the disorienting experience of sailing through a man-made rock canyon that requires millions to maintain against ongoing erosion and landslides. Around 11,000 vessels pass through annually, many carrying visitors who come specifically to witness what human engineering was willing to attempt and what the 19th century actually managed to build. Shaped by glacial forces operating across 2.5 million years, Fjord cuts through western Norway in a channel nearly 15 kilometers long and over 1,200 meters deep, a chasm carved by ice and left open to the sky when the glaciers finally withdrew from this landscape. Jagged peaks rising 1,500 meters above sea level frame the fjord on both sides, and the vertical drop from summit to seafloor reaches more than 1,900 meters, a range of elevation compressed into a single view that defines the character of the entire surrounding region. Water is everywhere here. Approximately 98 inches of annual rainfall sustains countless waterfalls descending the cliff faces, among them the Seven Sisters and the Bridal Veil, each with its own flow pattern and legend accumulated across the centuries of human presence in this landscape. Seasonal snowmelt loosens rock on the steep slopes and occasionally sends landslides into the fjord below, and within the narrow canyon walls, sound behaves in unusual ways, echoes lingering for up to 7 seconds and turning a single shout into a rolling sequence of reverberations that seem to belong to a space much larger than the one producing them. UNESCO designated Fjord a World Heritage Site in 2005, and its scenery directly inspired the Kingdom of Arendelle in the film Frozen filmmakers, drawing from the real peaks and icy vistas with a fidelity that the landscape itself makes unnecessary to embellish in any way. In central Turkey, the landscape of Cappadocia was shaped over millions of years as wind and rain eroded soft volcanic rock into towering spires known as fairy chimneys, formations rising across the valleys in dense concentrations that produce a terrain appearing designed rather than eroded by natural geological process. Beneath the surface, ancient civilizations carved entire cities into the rock, some descending 8 levels deep, built for shelter and defense in a subterranean architecture that used the stone itself as both the building material and the protective wall surrounding the community within. At sunrise, hundreds of hot air balloons lift into the sky above the valleys, and stone pillars a daily spectacle that has become inseparable from the region's visual identity and one of the most widely recognized aerial scenes in the world. For centuries, people hollowed homes, churches, and storage chambers directly into the rock, and many of these cave spaces have since been transformed into boutique hotels. At the center of the region lies Gurama, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, surrounded by dense rock formations containing more than 30 rock-cut churches and chapels dating from the 10th to 12th centuries. Inside, Byzantine frescoes still glow across the walls, preserved across a millennium by the region's dry climate, continuing to tell sacred stories in paint that has outlasted every civilization that observed it since. Founded more than 2,000 years ago at the crossroads of trade routes linking Arabia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean, Petra became one of the ancient world's most prosperous cities, its position alone transforming a naturally formidable sandstone landscape into an extraordinary center of commerce and accumulated wealth. Beginning around 300 BC, the Nabatean people carved entire structures directly into the towering sandstone cliffs surrounding the site. Temples, tombs, homes, ceremonial halls, and a rock-cut theater of such scale it could seat approximately 8,500 people, all sculpted from solid stone. Petra's main entrance passes through the Sick, a narrow canyon stretching roughly 1.2 miles before opening suddenly onto the facade of the treasury, the site's most celebrated monument and one of the most startling architectural revelations available to any traveler anywhere on Earth. An elaborate system of water channels and underground reservoirs captured rainfall and sustained a population of nearly 20,000 people in a desert environment that offered almost none of that resource without such engineering. A devastating earthquake in 363 AD destroyed much of the city and began its long decline. And even today, archaeologists estimate that only approximately 15% of Petra has been fully excavated, meaning the great majority of what the Nabateans built remains sealed inside the rock. In the remote landscapes of Xinjiang, where desert winds have been shaping the earth for millions of years. Formed over tens of millions of years through tectonic uplift and the patient erosion of wind and water, the Tianshan Grand Canyon in Xinjiang reveals one of the most vivid geological spectacles in China. Vast sandstone cliffs stained in deep red, scorched orange, and muted violet by the slow oxidation of iron-rich mineral layers laid down across geological ages. Some walls rise beyond 300 feet, their surfaces shaped into narrow canyon passages, twisted ridgelines, and natural stone arches, by desert winds reaching speeds of 40 miles per hour, forces that have made this landscape a textbook of erosion science. Scholars call it exactly that, reading each exposed rock stratum as a chapter in the planet's geological autobiography. To reach the canyon, visitors follow a winding desert road where every bend in the path reveals something new, cathedral-like stone columns emerging from the dust sections where the canyon walls close so near that only a thread of sky remains visible above. Most people walk through in silence. Sound carries differently here. Footsteps and breath echoing in spaces that feel less like outdoor terrain and more like the interior of something ancient and enclosed. For those seeking to feel the full weight of deep geological time, the Tianshan Grand Canyon is a journey not just across landscape, but into the most elemental memory of the Earth itself. Lake Baikal in Siberia is the oldest and deepest freshwater lake on Earth, formed over 25 million years ago and descending to depths exceeding 1,600 meters, holding approximately 20% of all the planet's unfrozen fresh water in a single body of water. Beneath its surface, sediment layers, stretching for miles, preserve a continuous climate record, extending back through ancient ice ages, a geological archive contained within the lake itself. In summer, the water reaches a clarity rarely found in any inland body, with visibility extending to depths of over 40 meters and the surrounding Siberian mountains reflected in the surface as in polished glass. Baikal sustains more than 3,700 species, nearly two-thirds of which exist nowhere else on Earth, one of the highest concentrations of endemic life found in any freshwater system on the planet. Among those species is the Baikal seal, the world's only exclusively freshwater seal, isolated from its Arctic ancestors thousands of years ago, and adapted over that long separation to life in pure inland water, with populations producing tens of thousands of pups each year in conditions unlike those of any other seal species. At the edge of the sky, Komolangma rises into conditions so extreme that the act of reaching it is defined as much by survival as by ascent. Known to the world as Everest, Komolangma rises to 29,032 feet above sea level, born approximately 50 million years ago from the collision of the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates, a force so immense that it is still pushing the mountain upward by several millimeters every year. Near the summit, the slopes are locked in permanent snow and ice. Temperatures fall below -40 degrees. Winds exceed 100 miles per hour. Oxygen levels drop to roughly a third of what the human body requires at sea level. In these conditions, survival itself becomes the primary act of mountaineering. And yet each year, climbers ascend toward what is known as the death zone, carrying equipment, fixing ropes, moving through frostbite and exhaustion, one careful step at a time. Every footfall above a certain altitude is a negotiation between the human will and the mountain's absolute indifference. Komolangma is the final frontier of vertical ambition, a place where endurance science and something beyond both are tested against the most extreme mountain environment the planet has produced. Located in Zhejiang Province, Nangzun Watertown is one of the Jiangnan region's most gracefully preserved settlements, a place where the elegance of classical Chinese architecture and the rhythms of canal life have continued together without significant interruption across a span of centuries. Stone bridges arch over narrow waterways, traditional wooden homes line the banks, and willow trees move above passing boats in a scene calm enough to hold attention without effort, a quality of undramatic beauty that rewards patience more than it rewards the quick look. What distinguishes Nangzin from similar water towns is the particular refinement it carries once home to powerful silk merchants. The town still reflects a prosperity expressed through classical gardens, grand mansions, and intricately carved courtyards standing beside the canals in various states of careful preservation. Wandering the old streets, the atmosphere opens gradually, a tea house hidden in a shaded courtyard, a quiet temple beside the water locals whose families have occupied the same addresses for generations and who move through the town with the ease of people entirely at home in their own history. Nangzin is not a place of spectacle. It is a place of stillness, an invitation to slow down, move without agenda, and find that simplicity, when it has been sustained across enough time, becomes its own form of remarkable that no more dramatic landscape can quite replicate. Rising abruptly from the Amazonian jungle, at the meeting point of three countries, Mount Roraima presents sheer cliff walls more than 400 meters high, carved from Precambrian sandstone nearly 2 billion years old, some of the oldest exposed rock on the surface of the Earth. There are no roads to the base of this mountain. Reaching the summit requires multi-day movement through dense rainforest and open savanna, and the plateau above receives visitors slowly and entirely on its own terms. At the top, temperatures remain cool despite the equatorial heat below, and constant cloud cover sustains streams that spill over the edges as cascading waterfalls, including waters that contribute to the headwaters of Angel Falls far beneath, in the jungle. Isolation has shaped the biology of this plateau in extraordinary ways. Over 30% of the species living on Roraima exist nowhere else on Earth, including amphibians that have adapted to crawl rather than hop across the slick and exposed stone surfaces. Carnivorous pitcher plants fill the nutrient-poor soil of the summit, trapping insects in pools of sweet nectar, forming the base of a fragile and entirely self-contained ecosystem that has developed here in biological isolation from the world below across timescales that make human presence feel very recent indeed. Amidst the swirling clouds of mainland China, time seems to stand still on these thousand-year-old sandstone cliffs. Here, winding pathways and ancient shrines are carved directly into the rock, standing firm as courageous witnesses to history. Each brick, each wooden beam at a height of thousands of meters is not only the pinnacle of architectural art, but also a declaration of humanity's indomitable will in the face of fierce nature. As the setting sun bathes the mist-shrouded mountain peaks in golden light, the mystique of the legendary East becomes more apparent than ever. And that's just the opening chapter of an awe-inspiring journey where we'll step through the door of time to admire the magnificent wonders of China. far above the valleys of Shanxi province, where wind ice and time have worked for millions of years to reshape the land. Wutaishan in Shanxi province rises above 9,000 feet through millions of years of tectonic uplift and glacial shaping, its 5 broad summit platforms forming a rare high alpine basin, unlike almost any other mountain structure in China. At dawn, mist pours between the peaks and settles into the basin below, creating the appearance of a white sea moving slowly through the stone, calm and ancient and utterly still. But it is the human heritage of Wutaishan that extends its meaning beyond geology. More than 50 historic temples are distributed across the mountain slopes, some of them standing for over 1,200 years, their mortise and tenon, wooden structures built without a single nail, aligned in accordance with Buddhist cosmological principles tied to the Bodhisattva of wisdom. Stone and brick pagodas rise in clean layered tiers across the ridges, and prayer halls stand on raised platforms built to resist the mountain's brutal winter storms. Wutaishan is not simply a mountain with temples upon it. It is a place where natural grandeur and sacred tradition have been in quiet, continuous conversation for over a millennium, and where that conversation shows no sign of ending. Some places are defined not by their size, but by the significance they carry across centuries of belief and history. Rising from the blue waters of the East China Sea, Putuocean is a sacred island shaped over 60 million years of geological history, a place where ancient granite pushed upward through the ocean floor to become, over centuries, one of the most spiritually concentrated landscapes on the Chinese coast. Covering only about 5 square miles, the island holds more than 100 temples, shrines, and pagodas, a density of sacred architecture rarely matched anywhere in the mountain traditions of China. Stone staircases carved from the bedrock lead upward through the slopes toward elevated halls, while temple rooftops rest on ridge lines shaped by centuries of sea wind. At the island's spiritual center, a bronze Guanyin figure, nearly 100 feet tall, stands above the shoreline, patient and vast, looking out over the arriving waves like a guardian beyond the reach of time. Perched is not simply a place of worship, it is a living record, one where geology, sacred architecture, and generations of human devotion have grown together into something quietly and permanently extraordinary. At the far edge of the Himalayas, where the world begins to dissolve into ice and silence, Meili Snow Mountain rises as one of the most extreme and untouched landscapes on Earth. Meili Snow Mountain rises from the edge of the Himalayan range like a frozen cathedral, its highest peak soaring above 22,000 feet into air so cold and thin it makes every breath a conscious act of will. Scholars believe the vast glacial systems blanketing this mountain preserve ice more than 10,000 years old, ancient atmospheric records locked within frozen layers that speak of climates long before human civilization began. Here, winter is not a season, it is a permanent condition. Temperatures plunge deep below freezing without warning, and fierce storms can build along the razor ridgelines in minutes, turning a clear sky into a whiteout of driving snow and wind. Yet each year determined trekkers cross waist-deep snowfields to reach these slopes, their footprints the only marks on an otherwise unbroken expanse of white. At remote base camps, small clusters of bright tents glow against the snow like quiet constellations scattered across a frozen sky. Meili Snow Mountain is where beauty and survival are separated by the thinnest of margins, a place where the wilderness is not a backdrop, but the only truth that remains. In Chile's Atacama Desert, Valle de la Luna presents a landscape the planet itself seems to have borrowed from beyond its own atmosphere. Millions of years of wind erosion and rare rainfall have sculpted salt flats, dunes, and sharp rock formations into shapes so unusual that comparison to the lunar surface is not exaggeration, but simple description. From the valley floor, Dunes, like the Duna Mayor, rise above the terrain, and salt deposits crack apart in geometric patterns as they dry. Traces of past salt mining and weathered ancient stone columns add geological depth to what is already an extraordinary visual landscape. At sunset, the valley catches fire in crimson and gold, and long shadows stretch across the dry earth. In one of the driest environments on Earth, standing here produces the genuine sensation of having left the planet entirely. What would it feel like to stand above the clouds without leaving your own country? Rising to 14,505 feet, Mount Whitney is the highest point in the contiguous United States, with a summit-to-desert drop of more than 10,000 feet over the Owens Valley below. Named after California geologist Josiah Whitney, this granite peak draws climbers from around the world. The Whitney Trail climbs more than 6,000 feet across roughly 11 miles, where thinning air and sustained altitude demand both physical strength and real determination. The summit also marks the southern terminus of the 211-mile John Muir Trail through the Sierra Nevada. Even here, life persists: sky, pilot wildflowers in alpine tundra, rosy finches near the peak, and snowmelt-feeding creeks that eventually reach distant city aqueducts. Mount Whitney is where the Earth's scale and the human spirit meet at the same point. High above the Norwegian fjord landscape, Trolltunga, the Troll's Tongue, extends horizontally from a cliff face in a narrow rock platform that appears to float in open air. Formed by glacial erosion during the Ice Age, it reaches outward above Lake Ringadalsvatnet, sitting approximately 2,300 feet below, with steep valley walls and deep blue water completing a panorama of serious scale. In Taiwan, the Liwu River has spent millions of years cutting through marble. The result is Taroko Gorge, a roughly 12-mile canyon with near-vertical cliffs rising thousands of feet a scale that defeats description on first attempt. The rare marble terrain carries swirling grain patterns and a luminous quality found almost nowhere else. This land has long been home to the Truku indigenous people, whose culture remains deeply tied to the gorge's natural environment. Bayang Falls and the Swallow Grotto are among the most visited features. Taiwanese macaques and rare black bears inhabit the park alongside diverse wildlife, and the cliffside trail views make it difficult to continue walking at any pace at all. Within Fiordland National Park on New Zealand's South Island, Milford Sound opens as a glacially carved channel of absolute authority. Sheer cliff walls climbing approximately 3,900 feet straight from the water's surface in a corridor of stone and sea that reduces every human measurement to irrelevance. Mitre Peak rises to 551 feet above the water in a granite tower that has come to define this landscape visually. Annual rainfall exceeding 252 inches means that after heavy rain, temporary waterfalls appear across every cliff face simultaneously, and the entire sound becomes a landscape in continuous motion. Beneath the surface, a layer of tannin-rich fresh water sits above deeper salt water, creating unusual light conditions that allow deep-water marine species to live in the shallows. Bottlenose dolphins, New Zealand fur seals, and the rare fjordland crested penguin share this ecosystem. Rudyard Kipling called it the eighth wonder of the world, and the meeting of glacial geology, temperate rainforest, and rich marine life here is not easily argued with. Deep within Switzerland's Bernese Oberland, the Lauterbrunnen Valley holds a glacially formed alpine landscape among the most frequently cited examples of natural grandeur in Europe, a place that delivers the essence of the Alps in concentrated and undeniable form. Cliff walls, reaching approximately 3,300 feet on both sides, carry 72 waterfalls descending in continuous white threads from the plateau above. The Staubachfall near the village drops in a single unbroken vertical that once inspired the poet Goethe, a cascade the landscape simply offers without apparent effort. Inside the rock itself, the Trümmelbachfälle, a series of glacier-fed waterfalls accessible through tunnels cut into the mountain, carry glacial meltwater through the cliff interior in a spectacle of subterranean force. Below, traditional Swiss chalets rest on meadow ground, alongside winding streams, framing the drama above without competing with it. Lauterbrunnen is where glacial geology and alpine tranquility have shared the same space for a very long time. The name requires no explanation once you arrive. Valley of Fire State Park in the American Southwest burns with color. Its Aztec sandstone, formed approximately 150 million years ago, compressed from ancient moving dunes into the vivid red rock that gives this place its name. Arch formations, honeycomb terrain, and improbably balanced rock structures rise throughout the Mojave Desert. At sunrise and sunset, iron-rich stone deepens to blazing crimson. Petroglyphs from the ancestral Puebloans more than 2,000 years ago are preserved in the rock, alongside petrified wood carrying fragments of a Jurassic forest. Established in 1935 as Nevada's first state park, Valley of Fire protects its geological heritage and the historic structures built by the Civilian Conservation Corps, a space where deep geological time and the long record of human presence share the same ancient stone. Deep in the tropical forest of West Java, Chicasso Falls descends 3 parallel curtains of water approximately 260 feet down a cliff face, spanning about 100 feet wide, in a triple cascade of considerable force. Known locally as Curug Chicasso or Curug Luhur, the falls empty into a turquoise pool surrounded by rainforest. The clear water of the Chicasso River contrasts sharply against dark rock, deepening the drama of the drop. Dense vegetation and nearby terraced rice fields complete the layered tropical landscape. Visitors reach the falls by a short forest trail or by riverboat, passing traditional villages along the way. Local legend connects this place to the figures of Nai Blorong and the King Prabu Siliwangi, lending mythological atmosphere to the grandeur of the falls. The Sonoran Desert spreads across Arizona, California, and northern Mexico in approximately 100,000 square miles, distinguished by a rare dual rainfall pattern with both winter rains and summer monsoons, creating an environment of unusual richness for a classified desert. More than 2,000 plant species are found here, making this one of the most biologically diverse deserts on Earth. At the center of that diversity stands the saguaro cactus, some individuals reaching 40 feet tall and living between 150 and 200 years. Saguaros function as living reservoirs, storing thousands of gallons of rainwater in expandable trunk tissue. They grow only in the Sonoran Desert, where woodpeckers excavate nest cavities later used by birds, bats, and other wildlife. Even in summer heat, exceeding 110 degrees Fahrenheit, life here continues with remarkable adaptability, proof that ecological abundance can emerge from apparent scarcity. Is this the longest slot canyon on Earth? Buckskin Gulch winds more than 16 miles through desert terrain, ranking among the deepest and most extensive slot canyons in the world. In places, its walls close to within 10 feet, while rising hundreds of feet above a compression of space that produces something between awe and instinct. Shaped by flash floods over thousands of years, the Navajo sandstone walls preserve ancient petroglyphs and animal tracks from those who once passed through this remote corridor. Most visitors enter via the Wire Pass Trail into a cool, shadowed corridor where sunlight rarely reaches the floor. Quicksand boulder jams and sudden flash floods demand constant awareness, but for those who come prepared, Buckskin Gulch offers deep silence and a quality of wonder found only inside ancient stone. North of Perth, in Nambung National Park, thousands of limestone pillars rise from golden sand across approximately 190 hectares, formations resembling a silent stone army standing in the open plain. Some are slender spires, others blunt masses, and the tallest reach up to 4 meters. These structures formed between 25,000 and 30,000 years ago, when shell deposits were compressed into calcified limestone, then hardened further by geological process. As centuries passed, coastal winds stripped away softer sand around the harder internal formations, revealing the pillars. Some surfaces carry diagonal layering that records shifts in prehistoric wind direction with the precision of a geological instrument. The contrast between the pale limestone columns and golden desert sand gives this landscape its surreal quality, a place where the slow and patient work of natural forces has produced something no human design could quite replicate. Rising from Iceland's remote interior, the Kerlingarfjöll range reaches approximately 4,846 feet above sea level, with vivid rhyolite peaks formed roughly 10,000 years ago. Within the range lies Hafnarfjörður, one of Iceland's most significant geothermal valleys, where the Earth's interior heat announces itself without restraint. Superheated water pushes mineral-rich deposits to the surface in tones of red, yellow, and green. Steam columns rise into cold air, and mud pools bubble beneath snow-covered ridgelines in a scene belonging to another planet. Trails lead between fumaroles and hydrothermal streams. Natural hot springs holding around 95 degrees Fahrenheit offer visitors a direct and physical encounter with volcanic energy below. Kurlingafjord is where Iceland's subterranean fire and its surface of ice and snow press most visibly against each other. If a scene like this stirs something in you, consider what destination has been waiting in your mind all along. The empty quarter stretches across the Arabian Peninsula in an expanse covering approximately 250,000 square miles, the largest unbroken sand desert on Earth. Summer temperatures exceed 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Annual rainfall barely reaches 1 inch, and vast petroleum reserves lie hidden beneath the moving dunes. Seen from satellite, great linear dunes extend in rolling waves of red-gold sand, delivering a sense of isolation and elemental scale that no crowded landscape can produce. In the desert's vast silence, the Earth reveals what its most extreme conditions truly look like. In earlier centuries, caravans followed frankincense trade routes across this terrain, until advancing desertification made such crossings increasingly impossible. Today, Bedouin communities, including the Banu Yam, continue life along the desert margins, sustaining traditions refined across generations in brutal heat and scarce water. What makes this moss-covered waterfall look like something that should not exist? Bigar waterfall in Romania sits precisely on the 45th parallel north, the exact midpoint between the equator and the North Pole, a location that adds mathematical uniqueness to an already exceptional natural feature. An underground spring along the Minis River flows over a rounded limestone outcrop thickly covered in vivid green moss, distributing water into thousands of individual threads descending across the bell-shaped formation in a living curtain of falling water. When sunlight catches the moss, the contrast with the clear water creates something closer to a painting than a geological formation. Surrounded by the forested Anina Mountains, locals call it the miracle of the Minis Gorge, a modest spring that has produced one of the most photographed natural features in Europe. The Serengeti spreads across approximately 5,700 square miles of northern Tanzania in one of Africa's defining wild ecosystems, anchored above all by the Great Migration, the largest overland mammal movement on Earth. More than 1.5 million wildebeest and approximately 250,000 zebra follow rainfall and new pasture in a vast circular route that never fully stops. This continuous movement drives the most dramatic predator-prey relationships in Africa. The Serengeti holds one of the continent's highest lion densities, an estimated 3,000 to 4,000 individuals, alongside cheetah, leopard, and hyena, completing a finely balanced hierarchy. Acacia-dotted savanna sustains giraffe, elephant, and Thompson's gazelle across a feeding structure of extraordinary complexity, largely unchanged since before human civilization began. Designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Serengeti continues to hold intact one of the last great wildlife spectacles the Earth still possesses. What draws puffins and explorers alike to this wind-battered North Atlantic island? The Westman Islands hold one of Earth's greatest Atlantic puffin breeding colonies. Between May and August, approximately 125,000 pairs arrive to nest. They burrow into grass-covered slopes above the open sea, while coastal cliffs fall directly into the churning Atlantic below. Colonies of seals gather on wave-washed rock platforms, adding to the dense wildlife of the island. Long isolation has kept everything raw and untouched. Visitors walk narrow trails to viewpoints high above the sea, where puffins entirely unbothered by human presence can be observed at close range. These islands remain a fragile and astonishing refuge at the windswept, salt-heavy edge of the European world. Off the northwestern coast of Africa in the Atlantic, the Spanish Canary island of Fuerteventura presents a landscape shaped by wind and geological time into something simultaneously oceanic and Saharan in character. In Corralejo Natural Park, golden dune fields extend along the coastline in long, unbroken sweeps where soft sand meets intensely blue water, and the boundary between desert and ocean becomes a single, continuous visual experience. The interior is defined by volcanic heritage, rough mountain ridgelines, hardened lava fields, and erosion-exposed rock formations documenting a history of violent eruption, now expressed only in shapes left behind. The trade winds blowing across Fuerteventura with consistent force year-round have given the island its sporting identity. Kitesurfing and windsurfing communities gather here from around the world for wind conditions among the most reliable on Earth. Where white sand meets dark volcanic soil in a single view, Fuerteventura delivers what Europe rarely offers: the atmosphere of the Sahara and the energy of the open Atlantic in the same landscape. Why is this remote archipelago considered one of Brazil's most extraordinary natural secrets? Fernando de Noronha is a cluster of 21 volcanic islands far off Brazil's northeastern Atlantic coast, where emerald-clear water surrounds basalt peaks in a marine ecosystem of exceptional purity and biological richness. Only the main island is inhabited by a small, permanent community that lives quietly alongside the natural environment. In 2001, the archipelago was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in recognition of its biodiversity and conservation value. The surrounding waters carry spinner dolphins in large numbers, sea turtles, reef sharks, and diverse coral communities within the same protected sea. Strict visitor limits and a comprehensive marine reserve system work to sustain this fragile ecosystem, one of the rare places on Earth where the ocean's life flourishes with minimal human interference. In Phang Nga Bay along Thailand's southern coast, the village of Koh Phanyi appears to float between sea and sky in a configuration that should not be possible. Centuries ago, Muslim fishing communities settled here by driving wooden stilts into shallow coastal waters and building their lives above the surface of the sea, a tradition that continues to the present day. Inside the village, narrow walkways connect houses, shops, and a small mosque built on a modest patch of sand, the settlement's only solid ground. In an environment with almost no land, creativity shapes every aspect of daily life, including the football pitch, a floating field built from scrap timber, and rafts serving as the primary recreational space. The main livelihoods are fishing and tourism, while limestone karst towers rising vertically from the surrounding sea create a landscape of theatrical beauty. Seasonal monsoon and high tides place constant pressure on the bamboo and timber infrastructure, yet Koh Phanyi has held its position across centuries, a living record of human adaptability and the particular coexistence with a natural environment that requires constant negotiation and never fully resolves. What happens when the largest salt flat on Earth becomes a mirror? Bolivia's Salar de Uyuni covers approximately 4,086 square miles of high plateau at roughly 12,000 feet above sea level. the remnant of prehistoric lakes that evaporated and left behind salt deposits reaching 30 feet deep in some areas. When the rainy season arrives, a thin layer of water spreads across the entire surface, creating the world's greatest natural mirror. Sky and cloud reflect with near-perfect accuracy, and the line between Earth and atmosphere dissolves entirely. Hexagonal salt crystal patterns extend without interruption across the flat. Beneath the surface lie enormous lithium deposits, among the world's most strategically important battery resources. Three flamingo species, including the rare James's flamingo, inhabit the shallow lagoons. Salar de Uyuni is where ancient geological history and hypnotic visual spectacle meet one of the most genuinely surreal landscapes the Earth has produced. Straddling the Utah-Arizona border, Lake Powell winds through Glen Canyon National Recreation Area with a shoreline of approximately 2,000 miles longer than the entire Pacific coast of the contiguous United States, formed by the flooding of canyon terrain shaped across millions of years of erosion. Created by the construction of Glen Canyon Dam, the lake brought deep water into contact with ancient red sandstone cliffs, producing a landscape where desert and water exist in a visual tension that seems impossible until you are inside it. Lake Powell is famous for its narrow side canyons, natural arches, stone bridges, and secluded coves where houseboats glide through a striking desert landscape unlike anywhere else. Beneath its waters lie submerged indigenous cultural sites and remnants of the old frontier, reminding visitors that this spectacular reservoir also holds a complex and layered history. Along the Zambezi River at the Zambia-Zimbabwe border, Victoria Falls generates what is recognized as the largest single curtain of falling water on Earth, a combination of scale sound and mist that overwhelms every sense before the cliff edge is even reached. The falls stretch approximately 5,604 feet across, sending water plunging 354 feet into a narrow basalt gorge. At peak flow, more than 17 billion cubic feet of water per hour pour over the edge, producing a roar audible from great distances and spray visible 12 miles away. The local Kololo community calls this place Mosi Oa Tunya, the smoke that thunders. The constant spray sustains a dense rainforest on both banks, creating a unique micro-ecosystem alongside the falls. Scottish explorer David Livingstone named it in 1855 for Queen Victoria, and it remains one of the most overwhelming demonstrations of natural force this planet offers. Along Iceland's southern coast, Diamond Beach presents a visual encounter between ice and volcanic earth found almost nowhere else on Earth. Icebergs carved from the Breiðamerkurjökull glacier drift through Jökulsárlón Glacier Lagoon before the ocean drives them back onto shore, depositing translucent blue-white ice fragments across black volcanic sand. The dark volcanic sand creates a striking contrast with the transparent ice, turning the entire beach into something resembling natural gemstones. When sunlight strikes the ice, it refracts in ways that fully justify the name, and each piece shifts continuously as tide and slow melting work on it. Heavy surf polishes the ice surfaces to a high luster that intensifies the jewel-like quality. This beach is where the cold force of glacial ice and the dark geological legacy of volcanic activity exist in the same space, Iceland's most opposite natural elements meeting in a balance that is both visually extraordinary and quietly impermanent. On Iceland's southern coast near Vatnajökull National Park, Jökulsárlón Glacier Lagoon is where ice and ocean exchange continuously. A body of water formed. As the Breidamajökull Glacier retreated, and icebergs began drifting slowly across the surface before reaching the sea. Ongoing melt has made this Iceland's deepest lake, reaching approximately 284 meters. The drifting icebergs carry colors ranging from blue-white to translucent to deep black, where volcanic ash, compressed into ancient ice layers, has recorded thousands of years of accumulated history. This shifting glacial landscape is also one of the most visible, ongoing records of climate change. Since the 1970s, the lagoon has expanded dramatically, now covering many times its original area. Seals rest on floating ice fragments, while seabirds circle above, forming a living ecosystem balanced on the glacier's movement. The relationship between ice and life here is one of the most delicate and most visually extraordinary in the Arctic world. There are countries you see, and then there are countries that ask you how you would live inside them. Switzerland is the second kind. In the imagination of millions of people, Switzerland exists as a single image: snow-covered peaks, crystalline lakes, open meadows, and small villages nestled quietly at the foot of the Alps. Positioned at the heart of Europe and sharing borders with Germany, France, Italy, Austria, and Liechtenstein, this is a small country into which nature seems to have poured every resource at its disposal. Mountain and valley and lake are woven together in a single, continuous breath, and more than 1,500 lakes are scattered across the land like light caught and held in the earth. In Switzerland, geography is not merely a map, it is the heartbeat of the life lived above it. Peaks that tower above their surroundings, isolated villages from one another, and deep valleys drew communities tightly together. Long and unforgiving winters taught people to plan ahead, to practice restraint, to prepare for the season buried in snow before it arrived. To understand the Swiss, one must first understand the way they chose not to resist the mountain, but to live alongside it. The isolation that difficult terrain produced gave rise, paradoxically, to communities of powerful self-governance, and over time, these communities united into the Swiss Confederation without erasing their local differences, instead preserving that diversity as the very foundation of a shared national identity. Switzerland today is simultaneously modern and deeply traditional. World-class financial centers exist alongside villages where time appears to move by a different logic entirely. Four official languages, German, French, Italian, and Romansh, reflect a country where each region carries its own color and character while remaining connected by a single shared spirit order, quiet respect for community, and reverence for the natural world. Swiss culture reveals itself in the smallest details. Near-perfect punctuality, the habit of keeping public spaces clean, a manner that is courteous without being ornate. Everything well arranged, yet nothing cold. In fact, the deeper you go into the mountains, the warmer Switzerland becomes more intimate, more honest, more itself. The Bernina Express is not a train ride. It is a passage through the most breathtaking landscape Switzerland holds. Climbing through the Swiss Alps, snow-covered peaks, emerald lakes, and villages of quiet perfection continue without interruption beyond the window. The view from the Oberalp Pass, at 2,253 meters above sea level, is so complete it edges toward the unreal. You are not looking at the landscape. You are moving through it. And every tunnel the train enters, and every bridge it crosses above the open mountain air arrives as an invitation to stop time, each one passing before you can fully accept. The Banana Express is not a journey from one point to another. It is a slow, deep immersion in one of the most beautiful places on this planet, a journey that does not release you when it ends. Among the most extraordinary train journeys on Earth, the Jungfrau Railway departs from Kleine Scheidegg and climbs to the Jungfraujoch, the highest railway station in Europe, positioned at 3,454 meters above sea level. Arriving at the Jungfraujoch, a world of permanent snow and ice receives you. Observation platforms looking out over glaciers and ice fields, and a palace of ice containing sculptures carved from the mountain's interior. This is not simply a train ride. It is a genuine journey into the heart of the Swiss Alps. The view from the highest point in Europe. The only question is whether you are ready to go up and see it for yourself. The journey in Switzerland began at Lauterbrunn. Moving away from the crowded city and into the heart of the Alps, the landscape shifted gradually. Space widened, mountains began to emerge, and the air cooled degree by degree. And then, without warning, the world simply opened. Between two enormous cliff walls, Lauterbrunnen appeared still deeply green and possessed of a beauty that removed the need for words. The first impression was not of houses or streets or people. It was a feeling, the sense that nature had been unusually generous in the making of this valley. On both sides, walls of rock rise in near vertical planes, and below them, a soft green floor of meadow unfolds. Small wooden houses, clean paths and waterfalls descending from great heights, as though the sky itself had chosen to travel downward in the form of water. Lauterbrunnen is not loud. It is not theatrical. It makes no effort to impress through noise. But it is precisely that quiet that makes everything within it more vivid. The wind carries more sharpness, the water sounds more clear, and even footsteps on a small path arrive with unusual clarity. In this space, visitors do not simply observe the landscape, they feel themselves crossing into an entirely different rhythm of living. The people of Lauterbrunnen do not live apart from the scenery. They live within it. The village does not attempt to dominate the natural surroundings it shelters beneath them. Small houses at the base of the cliffs, narrow paths crossing the meadows, quiet cafes, everything here seems to understand its place within the larger frame of this immense valley. Nature is always the subject. The human presence is measured and calm, and the people who remain here appear to have learned over time how not to disturb the equilibrium. What Lauterbrunnen leaves behind is not a sense of overwhelming grandeur. It is quietness, soft, but deep, gentle, but enduring. The sound of water-wooden houses, green meadow, and the memory that human beings are capable of living in perfect harmony with the natural world. The first thing that descends on you at Nine Arch Bridge is not fear, it is stillness. And then the train arrives, and that stillness becomes something else entirely. Hidden in the Sri Lankan highlands between Ella and Demodara, this colonial-era viaduct stretches roughly 91 meters above a dense gorge and rises approximately 24 meters from the ground below. 9 arches support a single broad-gauge track through a corridor of mist jungle and tea fields. Built not from iron and steel, but from stone, brick and cement, this structure does not look as though it forces itself upon the earth beneath it. It looks as though the hillsides quietly absorbed it long ago, and the bridge simply became part of what was always there. That is why it stays in the memory. Not the noise, not the speed, but the strange and particular stillness of a railway viaduct that is far too graceful for its degree of exposure. The Transandino Railway crosses 200 kilometers of the Andes between Argentina and Chile, a journey through soaring peaks, breathtaking valleys, and high-altitude terrain, of a scale that makes ordinary language feel inadequate. Through tunnels and across bridges and a long track laid at the very edge of cliff faces, snow-covered summits and rivers cutting through the earth below alternate in continuous panorama. Originally constructed to carry trade between two nations, this railway now offers travelers a way of experiencing the beauty of the Andes that no other form of transport can replicate. Is there a more compelling reason to cross the most dramatic mountain range in the world than in the company of landscape this extraordinary? Leaving Lauterbrunnen was not a departure from beauty. It was an ascent into another register of it entirely. The path toward Wengen felt like walking slowly upward onto a vast balcony from which the whole of the Alps could be seen spread below. The first thing to arrive was a change in rhythm. No engine sound, no hurried movement of vehicles, only the sound of the mountain railway wind crossing the slope and unhurried footsteps along small path. Wengen does not follow the tempo of the modern world, but it is not a relic of the past either. Comfort, precision, hospitality, and attentive service are all present here. And yet, from any point in the village, a glance upward or outward reveals the valley of Lauterbrunn, below green slopes alongside and snow-covered peaks, standing in silence on the horizon. To live at this altitude demands adaptation across every dimension: movement, the transport of supplies, the maintenance of daily life, the management of the tourist seasons. In a landscape this delicate, the people here appear to have understood that carelessness is not affordable. In Wengen, no urgency arrives, no impulse to take a few photographs and move on. Sitting in a small courtyard and watching the afternoon light descend slowly across a distant summit carries in that moment the feeling that nothing further is needed. The memory Wengen leaves is different from Lauterbrunnen's. It is the quiet of altitude, the clarity of the light, the openness of space, and a rhythm of life that makes the mind feel lighter. the rare equilibrium where nature does not overwhelm human presence and human presence does not overwhelm nature. What remains when you leave Wengen is not the image of a small chalet. It is the sensation of having passed through a place where time follows a different logic than the one most of us have agreed to live by. There are records, and then there is this one. The Qinghai-Tibet Railway runs 1,956 kilometers from Xining to Lhasa, reaching an altitude of 5,072 meters, the highest point any railway on Earth has ever reached. Snow-covered peaks, open grassland, and alpine lakes glowing with an almost impossible clarity pass beyond the window in a continuous succession of scenes that each stop the breath before the next one arrives. Completed in 2006, this railway is more than an engineering achievement. It is the economic artery connecting Tibet to mainland China, a structure with consequences that extend far beyond the journey itself. What does it feel like to look out at a landscape this immense, from the highest point on Earth that a train can reach? The question answers itself the moment you arrive. From Narvik in the Arctic Circle to Kiruna in Sweden, the Ofoten line covers 731 kilometers of Norwegian wilderness, from snow-covered peaks to the rough and magnificent fjords, the country's most elemental beauty visible from the front row. In winter, the snowscape produces something approaching a fairy tale made real. In summer, the midnight sun casts a light over the landscape that does not quite belong to any ordinary hour of the day. The Ofoten line is one of those journeys that belongs on a list not of places visited, but of experiences that change what you understand beauty to be. The most complete expression of luxury rail travel through the Canadian Rockies, from Vancouver to Banff, or from Vancouver to Jasper, up to 750 kilometers of journey unfold with magnificent peaks, crystalline lakes, and ancient unbroken forest continuing beyond the window without end. Fine dining, exceptional service, and the extreme beauty of the Canadian wilderness occupying every available line of sight. This is not simply a train journey, it is a meeting with wild nature at a scale that stays with you long after the destination has been reached. If Lauterbrunnen is a valley held firmly between its walls of rock, and Wengen is a quiet balcony surveying the world below, Grindelwald is an open door through which everything expands and comes alive. The arrival felt like a release of space. Meadows reaching outward in every direction, wooden houses scattered across the slopes, a winding road, following the contours of the hillside, and in the distance, snow-covered peaks, standing like a vast protective wall across the full width of the valley. More people move through Grindelwald than through the villages before it, and more movement fills the air. Yet somehow, within that greater activity, Grindelwald does not lose its balance. No sense of being overwhelmed, no intrusive noise. The particular Swiss quality of order, clean, clear, maintaining just enough distance from the natural landscape to protect it rather than consume it. The paths of Grindelwald do not move from point to point in a straight line. They lead you to the same landscape from different angles across different light. Meadow in front, houses behind, snow-covered peaks receding into the distance, and somewhere on a small slope between them, there comes a moment of stillness that carries no particular event within it. Nothing happens, and in that moment, Grindelwald is felt most completely. Not through the eyes alone, but through every sense at once. Clouds move without pause, alternately covering and revealing the peaks above. Sunlight travels down the slope, turning the meadow green, now brilliantly vivid, now soft and muted. This continuous movement ensures that no two steps through Grindelwald are ever quite the same. The afternoon here holds its own kind of beauty. The light warms and softens, mountain shadows lengthen across the valley floor, and every scene settles slowly into something more still. For the first time in the journey, the need to move on dissolves on its own without effort. Grindelwald does not insist. It makes no claim about itself, and it is precisely this quality that makes it linger, a place that proves nothing and yet stays with you for a very long time. Set at the heart of Kyoto, the Sagano Scenic Railway winds alongside the Hozu River through dense forest mountain terrain and the traditional Japanese landscape as it changes with every season, drawing passengers completely into the world beyond the window. In autumn, especially, the foliage transforms the journey into something closer to moving through a painting in motion, deep crimson, orange, and gold, covering every surface as the train moves through it. This is not simply a form of transport. It is a rare opportunity to feel the essence of Japan moving through you as the landscape does. Board the Tazara Railway and cross 1,860 kilometers of vast and largely untouched African wilderness, from dense tropical rainforest to open savanna, every hour of travel bringing a landscape entirely unlike the one before it. Passing through the Selous game, reserve elephants and lions may appear in the view beyond the window without warning or announcement. If there is a destination you have dreamed of reaching by this route, the journey itself will exceed whatever you imagined waiting at the end of it. Among the most beloved and visually rewarding routes in Indonesia, the Argo Gide connects Jakarta to Bandung in West Java, and across 120 kilometers of journey, dense green landscape, tea plantations, and mountain terrain fill the view beyond the window without pause. Fully air-conditioned carriages, attentive service, and the commanding presence of the Tangkuban Perahu volcano appearing in the distance. If you are seeking a journey that delivers both comfort and the natural beauty of the Indonesian highlands, the Argo Gide is a choice that requires no hesitation. Leaving Grindelwald, the landscape began to shift again. Open space gave way to terrain that was higher, more exposed, and unexpectedly still. As the cable car climbed, the change was not simply one of altitude, it was a signal that the pace of life itself was about to slow to something close to its most essential. Murren is not known for its activity. Entering this village tucked between cliff walls, the feeling arrived immediately of having stepped into a different order of time, not the contemporary world, but something older and more deliberate. No sound of engines, no hurried movement. What remains is a stillness full of natural life, not an empty silence, but a breathing one. The sound of footsteps on a path, wind crossing over the mountain above, leaves shifting in the cool air. Murren does not open like a conventional tourist destination. It does not invite you to pass through quickly. It opens as a space in which to stop and feel each moment as it occurs. The cold here was different from other cold, clean and welcome, the kind that sharpens all the senses, making the small details of this quiet space audible in ways that softer weather does not permit. What was discovered here was not simply a beautiful view. It was harmony between the human and the natural, between the past and the present, and between the self and the surrounding space. Murren may not be the most visually dramatic village for every traveler. But real peace was felt here, a place where there is no need to hurry, where beauty does not come from spectacle but from a subtle and complete accord between human life and the natural world. Set in Kyushu, Japan, the Aso Minami route covers 56 kilometers from Kagoshima toward the Aso region, a journey of rolling hills, rich farmland, and the commanding presence of one of the largest active volcanic craters in the world, filling the window as the train moves through. Wide glass panels allow the natural landscape to arrive without interruption, and the journey moves at a pace that lets the body and mind rest fully within it. For those seeking the quiet beauty of Kyushu's natural world, without urgency or noise, the Aso Minami route is the journey that delivers it. Running 760 kilometers along India's western coastline, from Mumbai to Mangalore, the Konkan Railway moves through dense forest, dramatic cliff face, and the Arabian Sea shoreline, the water appearing beyond the window, so close that the salt air feels almost present in the carriage. Bridge after bridge and tunnel after tunnel carry the line through the Western Ghats, each section opening into a new landscape before the previous one has finished arriving. The train moves at a pace that allows the coastal beauty to be fully absorbed rather than simply passed. Dramatic cliff or peaceful shoreline. In this beautiful journey, the question of which arrives first is one you will spend the entire ride answering for yourself. If there is a record that no railway on Earth has come close to matching it, belongs to the Qinghai-Tibet Railway. Running 1,956 kilometers from Jining to Lhasa, it climbs to 5,072 meters, 16,640 feet above sea level, the highest point any train has ever reached. Snow-covered peaks, open grassland, and alpine lakes of extraordinary clarity pass beyond the window in a sequence of views that each stop the breath before the next one arrives. Completed in 2006, this railway is more than an engineering achievement. It is the vital corridor connecting Tibet to the rest of China, a structure whose significance extends far beyond any single journey made upon it. After 5 days of peaceful village travel, the journey moved into a completely new chapter. The shift was felt the moment Zermatt arrived. A place where every path leads toward a legendary peak, where the landscape is not only magnificent, but carries an invisible force that reduces everything in its proximity to a more accurate scale. And at the center of all of it, the Matterhorn. To look up at that summit for the first time from ground level, known until then only through photographs and stories, the grandeur and the solemnity of it moved ahead of any available language. Zermatt was unlike any village visited before, a place where the human and the natural cannot be separated, where beauty comes not only from the landscape, but from the resilience of the people who have chosen to build their lives here. No gasoline vehicles move through these streets, only quiet electric trams and horse-drawn carriages. The stillness this creates is not simply the absence of noise, it is the feeling that the space itself breathes differently here. Walking the narrow lanes, traditional wooden houses emerge in the light of late afternoon, flower-adorned balconies, dark roof timbers, the contrast with the white of the distant snow-covered mountain, creating the sensation of having entered a different world entirely. Standing beside a small cafe with a cup of warm coffee and looking out at the scene, people moving without urgency, without pressure, within a space saturated with the quiet magic of the natural world. The people of Zermatt do not attempt to dominate the Alps. They do not display urban development as an achievement. They live alongside the mountain, the snow, and the cool, clear air in a relationship of genuine accord. As twilight settled and darkness descended, the Matterhorn remained exactly where it had always stood. The last light of day caught the snow on the upper slopes and held there briefly, and in that moment, it became clear that what had been traversed was not a series of villages, but a sequence of spaces, sensations, and moments that will not repeat themselves in quite the same form again. The Trans-Andino Railway is among the most beautiful train journeys available between Argentina and Chile, 200 kilometers through Andean peaks, dramatic valleys, and high-altitude terrain of a scale that asks something fundamental of the traveler passing through it. Tunnel after tunnel, bridge after bridge, track running along cliff edges, above rivers that divide the earth below snow-covered mountains, and flowing water in panorama from one end of the journey to the other. Originally built to serve trade between two nations, this railway now gives travelers access to the natural beauty of the Andes in a form and at a depth that no other means of travel can offer. Is there any reason to resist crossing the most dramatic mountain terrain in the world, if this is how the crossing can be made? The Zermatt Railway passes through the heart of the Swiss Alps, departing from the beautiful village of Zermatt and moving toward the Matterhorn as valley and forest fall away, and the peaks grow steadily taller with every kilometer gained. Through tunnels and across high bridges, the overwhelming landscape of the Swiss wilderness fills the window continuously, and reaching the summit at Gornergrat, a panorama of glaciers and snow-covered peaks completes the view on every side. This is not simply a form of transport. It is a complete immersion in the extraordinary scale of the Alps, a journey that asks nothing of you except that you look. If you find yourself in Thailand, the Maeklong Railway Market must be experienced directly. What unfolds here is almost too extraordinary to be believed until you witness it yourself. Each time the train passes through vendors selling fresh vegetables and seafood pull their canopies inward and step back from the track. With practiced speed, the train clearing the displayed goods on either side by a matter of centimeters. This scene repeats 5 times every day, and once seen, it is the kind of thing that does not leave the memory. Do not let this pass you by.